Vespiae in Italy Malta Mediterranea Illyrica Mesopotamia Mediapia Nesia Ila Arabia Assyrian Libya Egypt Red Sea Ethiopia. Model of the 1st century temple showing Solomon's colonnade to the east. The apostles carried on an intensive ministry in this area. Act 3. 11. 5. 12 Roman ruins in Samaria. The district of Samaria was the first region outside of Judea where the apostles were sent to preach the Christian good news. Act 8. 1-17 The seaport city of Joppa. Here the apostle Peter was given a vision directing him to preach to uncircumcised Gentiles. Act 10. 9-29 Commissioned by Jesus to be an apostle to the nations, Paul zealously carried out his assignment. Row 11. 13 His first missionary trip took him through Cyprus and into Asia Minor. He was thrown out of cities by angry mobs, even stoned and left for dead. But he returned to strengthen those who had become disciples. On his second trip, he reached into Macedonia and Greece. Here he was able to give a witness at the Areopagus in Athens, as illustrated below. On Paul's third trip, he preached for some 3 years in Ephesus, a crossroads of the Roman world. Then he went on to Macedonia and Greece to build up the congregations there. When being held prisoner by the Roman government, Paul used his time well to write inspired letters that are part of the Bible today. Apostle Paul's Ministry 746, First Trip. Act 13. 1. 14. 28 Second Trip. Act 15. 36. 18. 22 Third Trip. Act 18. 23. 21. 19 Paul's first missionary trip. Paul's route Rhodes Pia MP Hylia Tarsus Derblistria Iconium Galanzatia Rantosh Pisidi Perga Italia Rantosh Seleucia Syria Cyprus Salamis Paphos. Paul's second missionary trip. Paul's route Rhodes Syria Rantosh Cili Adobe Par MP Hylia Gia Elati Listria Iconium Phrygia Azia Bithynia Mesia Troas Amphipolis Philippi Thessalonica Berea Athens Corinth Ephesus Mediterranea Nesia Crete Ci by US Caesarea Jerusalem. Paul's third missionary trip. Paul's route Rhodes Antiochia Elatia Phrygia Ephesus Troas Marci Edonif Philippi Giri Assos Modalian Chios Samus Miletus Kos Patara Rhodes Mediterranea Nesia Crete Cyprus Tyre Ptolemais Caesarea Jerusalem Damascus, the street called Straight. After his conversion, blinded Saul was led to a home on this street. Act 9. 3-16 Theatre in Ephesus, where worshippers of Artemis Inset rioted in protest against Paul's ministry. Act 19. 29-41 Ruins of Antioch in Pisidia. After Paul had witnessed effectively in the synagogue here, he was thrown out of the city by an angry mob. Act 13. 14-50 Traditional site of Paul's prison in Philippi. Paul was beaten and imprisoned in this city, but the jailer and his household became Christians. Act 16. 19-34 Wall of ancient Thessalonica. After Paul had reasoned from the scriptures with the people here, an angry mob threw the city into an uproar. Act 17. 1-9 Ruins of ancient Corinth below, with Acra Corinth in the background. Paul endeavored to fortify Christians here in Corinth against the immoral way of life that surrounded the Athenian Acropolis as it now appears right. In the right foreground is the Areopagus, where Paul spoke to Rome as a prisoner. Act 23. 11. 28. 31 Paul was kept under guard in a house in Rome for 2 years. During that time he wrote 5 inspired letters to fellow Christians. Paul's trip to Rome. Paul's route Caesarea Sidon Cyprus Cilicia Galatia Myra Asia Nidus Crete Corda Mediterranea Nesia Macedonia Italy Malta Sicily Syracuse Regium Puteoli Romesi. Shortly before his death in 33 CE Jesus called Jerusalem the killer of the prophets and stoner of those sent forth to her. The city as a whole followed the pattern of its past and rejected the Son of God. Mount 23. 37. Jesus foretold what would happen. The days will come upon you when your enemies will build around you a fortification with pointed stakes. Luke 19. 41-44 He also said, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by encamped armies, then let those in Judea begin fleeing to the mountains. Luke 21. 20-21 In 66 CE following a Jewish revolt, Roman armies under Stius Gallus came against Jerusalem. But, as Josephus notes, Gallus suddenly recalled his troops and, contrary to all calculation, retired from the city. This afforded Christians the opportunity to flee from Jerusalem, which they did. Soon the Roman armies under Titus returned. This time they built a fortification with pointed stakes, an encircling fence 7.2 kilometers 4.5 mi long. After a siege of about 5 months, the city was thoroughly destroyed and the temple reduced to ruins. 3 years later, in 73 CE, the Roman armies captured the last Jewish stronghold, the mountaintop fortress of Masada. See below. Jerusalem's destruction emphasizes the importance of paying attention to Bible prophecy. Jerusalem destroyed by the Romans. Roman coins commemorating destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE 751. Roman conquest and destruction of Jerusalem, 70 CE. Arch of Titus in Rome showing Roman soldiers with temple loot. Raven 753. Rape. Rape is defined as unlawful sexual intercourse without the woman's consent, affected by force, duress, intimidation, or deception as to the nature of the act. Jehovah warned of the consequences that would come upon Israel if the people disobeyed his law. He foretold that, besides suffering sicknesses and calamities, they would fall into the hands of their enemies, and he said, "You will become engaged to a woman, but another man will rape form of will her." De 28. 30. This took place when, because of their disobedience, Jehovah removed his protection from the nation, and the pagan enemies overran their cities. Compares Ek 14. 2. Babylon was also foretold to suffer such treatment, which occurred when it fell to the Medes and Persians. Esther 13. 1:16. According to the law, such would not happen to nations subjugated by Israel, for the soldiers were forbidden to have sexual relations during a military campaign. 1 Sir 21. 5. 2 Sir 11. 6-11. A case of multiple rape in the city of Gibeah of Benjamin in the days of the judges set off a chain of events in retribution, which resulted in nearly wiping out the tribe of Benjamin. Good-for-nothing men in the city, perverted in sex desires, demanded to have sex relations with the Levite visitor. Instead of submitting, he gave them his concubine who had previously committed fornication against him. The men abused her all night until she died. The Hebrew term amidal.nar, rendered rape in this account, also has the meanings afflict, humiliate, and oppress. J.G. Chaps 19:20. King David's son Amnon forcibly violated his half-sister Tamar, for which Tamar's brother Absalom brought about his death. 2 Sir 13. 1-18. When the scheming Haman the Agagite was exposed before the Persian king Ahasuerus for his treachery against the Jews, and especially against Ahasuerus' queen, Esther, the king was enraged. Knowing that he could expect no mercy from the king, Haman in desperation fell down upon the couch where Esther was lying, pleading with her. When the king re-entered the room, he saw Haman there and cried out, "Is there also to be a raping of the queen, with me in the house?" Immediately he sentenced Haman to death. The sentence was carried out, and evidently afterward Haman was hanged on the stake that has been erected by Haman for the hanging of Esther's cousin Mordecai. Es 7. 1-10. In the record of the king's statement Es 7. 8. The Hebrew word committal.vash is used. It means subdue, subject Ge1. 28. J 34. 16. But can also mean rape. Under the law, if an engaged girl committed fornication with another man, both she and the man were to be put to death. But if the girl screamed for help, this was taken as proof of her innocence. The man was put to death for his sin in which he forced her, and the girl was exonerated. De 22. 23-27. Repharatha from a root meaning hill. A son of Benjamin, called his fifth at 1 Chronicles 8. 1-2. His name is absent from the list of those who went into Egypt Ge 46. 21 and from the listing of Benjamin's tribal families. New 26. 38-40. This may indicate that, regardless of where he was born, he died soon with no descendants, or else they were absorbed into a different family. Repharazah shortened form of Rephaiah, meaning Jah has healed. A descendant of Benjamin through Saul. Also called Rephaiah. 1 Ch 8. 33-37. 9. 43. Rafu from a root meaning hill. A Benjamite whose son Paul too was one of the 12 to spy out the land of Canaan in 1512 BCE knew 13. 9. 16. Ravenheb. O middle.rev. Gr. K.O. The first bird specifically named in the Bible. G8. 7. The largest of the crow-like birds, the raven measures about 0.6 meters, 2 feet in length and may have a wingspan of more than 1 meter, 3 feet. Its glossy plumage is notable for its jet black color. 5. 11. With iridescent steel blue and purple hues, the underparts at times having a touch of green. It has an extremely wide dotex to a acute muritra longo, razor 754 phrase according to its kind is understood to embrace the crow and other apparently related crow-like birds such as the rook, the jackdaw, and the chow, all of which are to be found in Palestine. The raven, unlike the crow, is usually a bird of the wilderness, often inhabiting mountainous regions and even deserts. It was among the creatures envisioned by Isaiah as inhabiting the emptiness and wasteness of ruined Edom. Issa 34. 11. The raven also has the practice of storing surplus food in rock crevices or burying it beneath leaves. These birds were thus an apt selection when God used them miraculously to carry in bread and meat twice daily to Elijah while the prophet was concealed in the torrent valley of Cherith. 1 Kai 17. 2-6. Ravens nest on cliffs or rocky headlands, as well as in tall trees. They mate for life and are devoted parents. Jehovah God, the true provider for all his creatures, directed Job's attention to himself by the question: who prepares for the raven its food when its own young ones cry to God for help, when they keep wandering about because there is nothing to eat? Job 38. 41. The psalmist also showed that the food brought by the wide-ranging parent bird